Okay, so you will see that I have filled out my scene with some furniture, found some books and little bric-a-brac to set on top of there, even add a couple pillows to the table. So hopefully you've had a chance to find some fun objects and place into your design. Our last step is going to be to add some lighting effects. Now, between the last video and this one, I've made an extra layer in your file now called lighting. It should be invisible when you first open it, but it will be there from the beginning. You won't need it until this step. So if you come across it, then, just make sure you're doing your design work and whatnot on this ground plan layer. And to add lighting to this, we're going to use the actual lighting instruments that you may be familiar with. So we have Source 4s, we have Parnells, there's all different kinds of things that you can choose from. And we're going to actually light this. So you get to kind of play lighting designer at this point for your rendering. So we're going to start by making this lighting layer active. And we're going to make it visible so that all of these other layers are still visible even though we're on here. This is a good time to point out that the layer options here, I usually keep this at show snap others. That way I can see the objects as they are on the layer, but I don't accidentally modify them. And one thing to know, if you go to start clicking on something and it doesn't select for whatever reason, like I'm clicking on these different objects that are in the ground plan, they're not going to select because my active layer is lighting. I have to physically go to this ground plan layer to be able to select them. So just keep that in mind. If I had this on show snap modify others, then yes, I could select the objects on that ground plan layer. Notice that it has a slightly different highlight color. That suggests that you're on a different layer. Also, the little handles are a different color, and you can select those and change those. It pays to be careful on this, and as you're doing this, if you accidentally reshape the walls and whatnot, it may be difficult to get back to where you were. So just be careful what you're clicking and how you're moving it. If you click and drag, you might accidentally move something around, and you don't necessarily want that. So just be careful. All right, so I'm going to put this back to show snap others so that I don't accidentally move things on layers that I don't expect to. So from here, I want to go to a top plan view. And you will also notice that this lighting layer has our truss that hangs over the apron. There is an indication of our front of house positions, and then each one of these pipes here, I'll turn these other layers off so you can just see it. These are all representative of electrics over the space. Now, I did erase one electric because that's where I have a border hanging, and one of the things that the lighting designer, the scenic designer need to work out sometimes are what battens can be used for electrics and what are going to be used for scenic pieces. So sometimes there is a discussion about what the needs are for the shows. So I took that one out because I wanted to keep that border where it was. Turn these back on. I have also placed in here some focus points. These are going to be helpful for when we actually place our lights and want to point them at places. A focus point can be found over here, so if you decide you want to add a focus point, you are more than welcome to do that. It is in the tool sets here from the Spotlight tool sets, and it will automatically add in the next letter from the alphabet, because its focus points are typically labeled by the alphabet. So I started with A, and I've got 5 focus areas across the front. I've got 4 in the middle and 2 upstage. So if you want to add any more, feel free. I do have these focus points. I changed some of the attributes. I changed the fill to none and the pen style to none. So you can't see that the solidness of that. So when you first put them in there, they usually default to something like this. On a light plot, that's great. You want them to show up in a rendering, not so great because they just kind of get in the way of your rendering. So if you turn those both to none, the solid fill and the solid pen, you're just left with the letters, which don't show up in the final rendering. But they do help you figure out where to point lights and whatnot. So these are all, Vectorworks has the ability to turn these things, these pipes, into lighting positions. And so it's a very smart document in that respect. This lesson is not about how to set up those lighting positions. So hopefully this will function, and if something goes wrong, we will troubleshoot, and then you'll be able to troubleshoot. But for the most part, this should work out pretty well as far as using these positions. All right, so the first thing I want to do is find a light. So I'm going to go up here to my resource manager, and again, I can go and through these files. Probably this one that says lighting instruments is going to have a good amount of them. So as I scroll down here, you can see all the different brands, all the different, mostly brands. There's a lot of different brands. We're pretty familiar with ETC. So here's your ETC sets, ETC source 4, and let's just click on the source 4 file. So I'm going to start with like some front light, side light. Now, I'm a scenic designer, not necessarily a lighting designer, so I have done some lighting design in my past, but those who are lighting designers will understand these things a little bit more maybe. But in the, I guess the short story of it is many of these lights have a degree. And the degree just means how wide the beam spread is. So I'm going to show you an example of that when we place some lights here. So I think I'll start with a source 419 degree. So I'm going to double click on that, and looks like I've already opened one of these up, so I'm just going to replace the format. And when you double click on a lighting instrument, it automatically makes the symbol, the lighting instrument tool active, which is this tool right here. All right, so as I go in there, I'm going to hang this on this piece of truss. So if you actually click to one of these lighting positions, it should place the object there. So you click once to set it, and then the second click is to affect the angle. If you just keep it straight up and down like this, that's going to be fine. You don't necessarily have to point it at your focus area. And if I go to a front view to look at that, notice how it's put it right on already in height with that piece of truss. If I go back to a top plan view, and let's say, I'm going to put this light here just to show you the difference. All right, so I've placed this light, and if I go to a front view, notice that it's down on the ground. So if you don't actually snap it to one of those lighting positions, those hanging positions, it will put it on the floor. So you'll have to be careful about that. Now, that's not to say that a lighting designer might hang a special pipe or do something something different in there, in which case this is treated more or less like a 3D object, and you can change its height in the object info. I'm going to delete that one for now. And let's go back to this light here. We'll put some more in there in a minute, but I just want to show you how this works. So once you have placed a light on your plan, you're going to have a light placed then in your visualization palette. So again, if you do not have this palette, most likely it's just not turned on. Check your window, check the palettes, look for visualization, and this is your light. Any lights that are on stage, any light objects will show up in this palette. Notice that there's an on button right here. We're going to go ahead and click that and turn that on. Show you what the effect is in just a minute. Then over here in our lighting or our object info, we see we have a lighting device selected. It is a It is a light. It is a ETC source for 19 degree. There's a whole bunch of information. The wattage, 575 watts. And here for color, you can actually type in a specific color of filter. So if you happen to know, if you have them memorized, Roscoe filters or Lee filters, I think will work as well. I'm not sure what other brand filters there are, but if you know the code that goes with them, you can type that in. Like for example, I think if I type in R60, I think that's like a blue color. So we'll see what happens here. We're not going to worry about dimmer channel. That's stuff that the lighting designer gets to deal with. We're not going to worry about it. And the other one I want to show you is the focus point. So if you scroll all the way down towards the bottom, you'll see a box here that says focus with an empty box. And let's say we want this to focus at C. So I type in C here, and as soon as I type in this focus, that makes these two objects, or these two, that makes these two pieces selectable. So I can actually like turn on the beam. I'm not going to keep this in my rendering, but the nice thing about this is it is going to show you what your coverage area, if I use that 19 degree source for a light here. So that's kind of a nice thing to know and to see. And if I go to a front view, again, I can say to draw beam, and you can see where that is. Now I set the focus areas to 4 foot off the ground. That's usually, if you imagine yourself standing on the ground focusing this, a 6 foot tall person in the middle is going to have the bright spot right about where it needs to go. So that's why those focus points are 6 feet off the ground, because that's where it would get focused if you were actually doing that. Let's go to a perspective view. I always like to look at these things in perspective. I'm going to turn that beam off. And I've already turned the light on over here in my visualization. And let's go ahead and just do an OpenGL. So notice now that we have a light in here, the scene itself has turned fairly dark. And I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. But you can see where that beam of light is. It is kind of cutting this person off at the chest, which may or may not be ideal. So if I go back to here and turn that back off, you can see where that light hits, right? So once you put that in there, if you decide that that is not what you want, or you put in a color that you don't like and you want to find another color, if I turn that off, see how that got brighter all of a sudden because that blue got taken out. I can, without having to go to my light and delete it and find another one, I can just go to this replace lighting device, and let's say I want to try the 36 degree. So if I double click on that, automatically it changes that 19 degree to a 36 degree, and now you have illuminated much more of the room. All right, one thing that I want to go back and look at with you is under View, there is a lighting menu here, Set Lighting Options. Now this is a blessing and a curse, you might say. So the nice thing about an ambient light is the ambient light is sort of like a sun, if you will. It just sort of provides an overall directional type of light. And for architecture, it is nice because it acts like the sun, so you can set it to be different times of days. There's different lighting options. When I'm doing a theater rendering like this, I will often just turn this off or turn the brightness way down, just so I won't have that sort of muddying up the lighting. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off just so you can see the difference here. Say OK. So now you can see how much darker it is. The only light being provided is that light from that, or the lumens, whatever, coming from that light. Now you can, I believe, hopefully this won't make a liar out of me, you can change the brightness by changing the wattage. See if it works. I think I lied to you. I wish there was a way to change the... Yeah, it doesn't seem to be letting me change the brightness of that. So you're a little bit stuck with the default here as you turn that on. There, you know what, there's probably a way to do that in here, and I just haven't discovered that yet to be able to share with you. So if somebody wants to find that out and can share it with the group, that would be amazing. Another option possibly for making that a little bit brighter if you wanted to might just be going and adding a second light very close to the first light and having it focused at the same point. Go down here, focus at C, and so again, this is kind of where you get to play lighting designer a little bit. Don't forget to turn it on. Do data. Oh, we added a focus to that. I guess it didn't take. And if we render it, so it's brighter. You put, you know, you can add 2 lights in there to add some brightness in there. So as you're designing your scene here, just know that you can add additional lights that you might not do as a lighting designer in like real life, but you can definitely add in extra things. And then, you know, for visualization purposes, if the scenic designer creates a 3D model, the lighting designer then can then come in, design their lights, put their positions, and you can almost storyboard your whole play just by turning the appropriate lights on and off. That takes time, and sometimes you don't have that amount of time. But if you want to previs what your designs are going to be, this is a really effective way to do that. Okay, so let's see if we can find maybe another type of light. Move that out of the way. What about see if there's any Fresnels in here somewhere. Now you do have to be a little bit careful. Sometimes the lights in here are not lighting objects, they're just sort of symbols. So not all of these are going to actively be able to emit light, but if you insert them using that lighting insertion tool, and when you look at the object info and it has all of the same information, if you're able to give it a focus point, it should be able to emit light for you. So I don't know, what's an 8-inch? I don't know what this is. Let's try this one. I'm going to say don't show this again because I know that's going to happen. All right, so I'm going to put this one on this electric. It's always a good idea to just go back to your front view and make sure it's where you think it's going to be, okay? And from here, I might as well just go to my perspective, get my view, and keep my focus on C. Draw my beam. You can always kind of check and see where your beam's going to go. It's going to be pretty wide, but we'll see what happens. I'm going to put, what was that, I'm going to put R60 in there, see if we can see the difference. And keep losing my visualization tab here. Turn it on. Go back to this so I don't keep lighting things. And put that right there. And first start with OpenGL. So if I turn that back off, let's see if it made a difference. So it did. It's not totally noticeable, but it definitely added some extra light in there. So hopefully you get the idea. As you add more lights, you create more of a focus on here, and you can create a scene. Another thing to note that is that you can actually deal with shutter cuts if you want to. And if you go into your visualization and double click on one of the lights, it should automatically select that light, even though I can't see it because it's hanging up here out of view a little bit. You can always double check, make sure that it's changed here. But you can actually go in and do shutter cuts. It gets a little bit tricky. You don't have to do it for this project, but it may be something that you want to do in the future. Of lighting designers, if you're working on this, you can go in and work on that. So you can actually change those details in there. There used to be a dialog that allows you to change some of that. It looks like I found it under Edit. So in here, like if you went to the shutters, you can actually change that. Again, because the light is focused on an area, sometimes it's hard to figure out what that's going to be. And you go back and forth a lot just trying to figure out what is what and where you want to put things. So again, if you want to play with shutter cutting, that would be fine. You can even turn these lights on and off just to see if that affects it dramatically or not. Okay, but know that you can do it. You can add shutter cuts. There's a whole bunch of other options in here. You can add gobos and textures to it, and you can really create some interesting effects on there. Okay, what else? Oh, let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to go back to the ground plan layer here. And for now, I'm going to turn that ambient light on just so we can see what's going on. I want to be able to see it a little bit, and that way, because as soon as you add any kind of lighting instrument, that ambient light becomes much more prominent. The ability to see light and to see the rest of the structure becomes very important. So I'm going to add, there are lamp instruments in here that will actually add an effect as well. So I don't know if this is going to be the easiest way to see this, because it's thinking about all of the lamps that go with the lighting instruments. So if we go to, I think it's in building furnishings. Notice there's rugs, chairs, there's lighting. Click on that one. What do we get? So here's some lamps. I don't know, not all of them are going to have actual lighting, like light bulbs in them, if you will. So you do have to be a little bit careful about that. I think most of the time it's going to be more obvious. Let's try this one. So if I double click on that, for a second, I'm going to place it on this table back here. So go to a top view. Again, click once to set it, twice for the angle. It's round, so the angle is not going to matter. Most likely it is sitting on the floor at the moment. So let's look at that. Yep, sure is. So use my move by points, and we'll nudge it just a little bit. And usually you know if the light has a lighting function if you see that little symbol in the middle there. That represents essentially a light bulb. So if I go now back to, well, I'm already in the front view. I can go in here, notice that that has been added to my visualization as a light. So that's good, it's already turned on. In my normal perspective. And when we render this now, you can see a little light lit up. So it really starts to become pretty effective as a scene in here, as if you were actually adding lights to your set. So if we go, let's go turn that to ambient. Let's just turn it down. I won't turn it completely off. So just enough that it still adds some light in there, but you can see our other added lights a little bit more. The one thing about this type of light, it's called a point light, and it tends to be sort of omnipresent. It really does go everywhere. There's not much fall off. You can turn the level down. That's a little bit better. So you can change the brightness in there a little easier. So that looks a little better. It's not quite so intense, but it's still throwing shadows all over the place, even across the room for that. So if we go and turn our ambient light just completely off, you can see what a difference that makes. We can turn that on and off so you can see. So it's a really bright light. You have to be a little bit careful of that. But you know, there's that possibility. Now, one other type of lighting tool that you can add, and I'm not going to add this to the lighting layer because this is actually, it's a lighting object for Vectorworks, and I'm really only showing you this as a another possibility because there's one little function that I really like with these light tools here. Well, there's a couple of different functions, but one in particular. So you select that, and you'll notice up here you have some different choices. So here's that light bulb. So if you ever do place a lamp or something that does not already contain a light bulb, you can sometimes add that without too much trouble. And then we have a spotlight mode, and then this one is, do I remember what this one is? Custom. So we want to use the spotlight tool because it's going to work sort of like our source 4s and our, our shutterable lights. So when I have this light tool selected, spotlight tool, I'm going to point it over here. I'm still going to hang it near the truss, and I'm keeping it on the ground plan layer just to keep it separate. And from here, I can choose a different color. So notice we're no longer dealing with Roscoe colors or Lee colors. You don't necessarily have to remember that. I can turn the brightness up and down with this one and tell it to cast shadows. Now, the more settings and things you turn on, the more memory it takes and the slower rendering happens. So just be aware of that. But we'll go ahead and put that down. So the first point sets it in the sort of XY position, and then let's point this one over at these two over here. So no longer dealing with focus points at this point, so you don't have to deal with those, but it also isn't going to associate with any of these lighting positions. So if I go to a front view, notice it is in the ground. So if I want it to look like it is up in the air with the rest of them, I need to change its Z position, and let's do 21 feet. right? So that just moved it up here, and it's still pointing down. We need to get it down on the ground. The easiest way to do that is to change this look to height, and we'll change that to 4 feet. And so now it is looking down from there. If we go back to our top plan view, we can see we still have that same angle, but from the front, it's here. This will still show up in my visualization as a light. It's just a different kind of light at this point. And I guess the nice thing about these is you can adjust the beam spread. So while a source 4 has 19 degrees, 26 degrees, for these lights, you can change them to be whatever you want. Not useful really for the lighting designer, at least as far as their light plot goes. I mean, a lighting designer can literally put in their light plot using all standard lights and be able to turn them on and off based on, you know, what scene they want to try to visualize. These kinds of lights are really more for just creating sort of that, you know, scenic rendering, something like that. Thing that I like about these is you can make it look like there's fog in the room. And I was trying to find that same setting with the standard lights, with the source 4s and whatnot. And it may exist, but I haven't found where to turn that on and off yet. So, you know, someday I'll maybe figure that one out. But if we look at this, let's go to perspective. Now, here's one thing to remember. As we add different lights, OpenGL is only going to do so much for you. It's not necessarily going to give you all the detail in here, but you can see as I turn the brightness up and down, you can kind of see where that is turning. It's kind of lighting up this corner, and this little couple's getting some light on them now. And if I turn on this lit fog button, it will take a minute, but it should pop up. And if it doesn't, and you know, if everything else becomes available, so we can't see that lit fog, that means that our OpenGL rendering is just not able to do it. So at this point, I would usually switch to a fast Renderworks mode, and everything's going to look a little different because it's going to look better than that. So it's a little intense. My beam spread is probably too big for that. So if I go back and select that light, again, I can sort of almost in real time change the beam angle. With the fast Renderworks, you have to let it re-render every single time. Sometimes it's easier to just stop it from rendering or go back to a wireframe and make your adjustments, because again, every little thing is going to make it have to re-render, and that can get really obnoxious really quickly. So again, fast Renderworks, let's try it again. And this is sort of where time starts to become an issue. Also notice, remember those image props that we did and left it at the constant reflectivity? See how bright they are? That's because of that constant reflectivity. All right, so that completed the rendering. That's kind of terrible. It doesn't look very good. Let's see what final quality Renderworks looks like. This is going to take a little bit longer. Okay, well, halfway through that, I realized I had that fog it was way too hot. So I was trying to hit escape like I told you earlier, and it was not stopping it. But it did seem to allow me to go ahead and go back to a wireframe. So not 100% sure I know why that happened like that, but that's where it can get frustrating. If you don't if the escape doesn't work to stop the render process, you could be sitting there for a long time. So I guess the moral of that story is never give up and try something else. So that's what I did. So I was able to get it to finish there in a quicker manner. All right, so I want to go back. I need to select this light again, because when I hit escape, all it did was unselected my light. And I'm going to turn the brightness down some. And I want to change, I want to maybe turn on the emitter and then turn the brightness down. I don't know. I'm just kind of testing it. I'm going to see what happens. This distance fall off I might change. You know what? I'm going to turn that emitter off and change this distance fall off to realistic to see if that makes a difference in my render. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to Final Quality Renderworks. Give it a second to see if this is what I want. Okay, I realized again that you know, the Renderworks style is always going to be a much brighter version than the OpenGL. So I'm going to actually turn this light off, and this one, double click on that to select it again. I'm going to turn the brightness down on it as well. Let's try one more time. So this time I realized that this couple is not being lit up whatsoever by that light. So I'm going to go back to that and see where it's pointed. And I'm going to change that to be in front of them a little bit more. Anytime you change one of these types of lights, always go back and look at what it's changed over here. So it will often try to snap to an object, a 3D object on there. So you can see how it's changed that to 0, whereas I had it at 4 foot. Let me go back and check here. So I'm going to see if that now makes a difference. And open that up for whatever reason it got closed down. All right, one more time. I just want to get a little bit of front light on these folks so they're not invisible, they're not in silhouette. All right, well that didn't seem to work either. So a lot of these rendering processes in my video editing, I will be speeding that process up, so it will go by in your video that you're watching much faster than it does in real time. But, you know, again, once you kind of realize something is not looking like what you want, you just escape, and I usually go back to wireframe so I can see that better. So what I was noticing is, for whatever reason, that light was not lighting up the fronts of them. So for these purposes, I'm just going to go back. Oops. I'm going to go back to my lighting layer and go to a top view. And you know, I'm going to take this light, this light that doubled, and I'm going to move it over here. Double check that it is still attached to the truss. It is, good. And it's still going to say that it's focused on C, but I'm going to change this to focus at A. Okay, if I draw the beam just to double check. Let's see what it looks like if I focus it at B. I think B is going to be the winner. If I go to a front view with the beam, oh, you know, maybe I do want A. Okay, I'm going to keep it at A. So looking at that beam from different angles definitely helps you to kind of determine which angle you want to take for that. So I'm going to turn that beam back off. Now I'm keeping my little light. You can see it here. It's on that other layer, so I can't select it. But it should still illuminate as necessary. That light was, I think, this one, so I'll make sure we turn it on. Get back to my view. And one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to interrupt the flow just a tad. Notice how every single time I go back to the front view and the perspective and I have to change all of those settings. That gets old after a while, doesn't it? So I'm going to actually use a function here called saved view. And with this, hit saved view, and I'm going to say, so this will go back to a wireframe. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky and you have to be careful. It should work fine because it will always bring me back to my lighting layer, and it will always bring back the visible classes that are on here. Now sometimes if there are objects from the resource browser, they'll have different classes. Like for example, this furniture main class is one that's pretty standard for the furniture pieces. And then there's some lighting classes in here. And if you don't already have those objects set up in your saved view, if we had done the saved view before we added some of these things, every time you go back to that class or that saved view, those classes will be invisible. So you would have to go back and edit the view, turn those classes on, and it can get pretty cumbersome fairly quickly. But know that it's there, it's possible. So when I go, I can go back to my top view here, mess around with the lights, add those in, change what you want to change, and for example, I'm gonna put in another, what do I have? I have another Fresnel. So I'm gonna put a Fresnel up here on this electric, focused at, I need to go to a top plan view so I can actually see what I'm focusing at. Actually, I'm going to put one there as well, and I'm going to move this one over, and I'm going to make this one focused at J, this one focused at K. Make sure they did attach to that electric, so that's good. And when I'm ready to go back to that same view, I just have to go click on there and choose the perspective that I just saved. It just makes it easier than having to go and click 5 different things to get to the view that you want. All right, so back to so I've added some extra lights in here. I still have that one light that is not a physical instrument. Oh, I need to turn these all on. And it should be good. And again, OpenGL is not going to let us see those things, so try the Fast Renderworks. And every time you add more lights, more details, it takes longer to render. Okay, and it's done. So you can see it took 2 minutes and 33 seconds for that to finish. And again, my image props, because of that constant reflectivity, are pretty bright. There's not a lot you can do about that other than to turn that constant reflectivity off, but then the only way you're going to really see them is by adding some additional lights. You could always add like a little special or use that lighting tool, this one with a really narrow beam. I mean, you can really create some interesting effects with that. Over here, my people got lit up really well, and this would be a great time to use those shutters so that you can cut maybe off of that wall, because that looks kind of weird. In a real life situation, you'd probably shutter off of that so that you don't get that weird shadow. But my Fresnels here in the background, you know, created some light back there. So, I mean, this is a very simple setup. I will encourage you to add more lights to create the effect that you want. And you can decide whether you want that to have constant reflectivity or not. This background image might make sense to keep that, but picture image props that you put in here and on your walls may not be as useful with the constant reflectivity. And you know, that more or less sums up adding lighting in there. Again, it's going to be more complicated the more you add in there. The rendering time is going to take longer, but it starts to become pretty effective, and it becomes a really nice way to present your work as scenic and lighting designers in particular for production work and whatnot.